Hey guys, welcome back to the 626 podcast.
Welcome.
We're in a little different setup this time.
We are. I love it.
Yes. Shout out to Pine Studio.
For sure.
Let us actually have a nice set for once instead of
A
our couch.
studio.
Yeah, instead of our couch all the time.
Love this.
Which I think helps us feel more like we're official.
More professional.
Which rolls perfectly into what we're going to talk about today.
Honestly, yeah.
So we actually had this conversation while we were walking one day, right?
We were walking. We were taking a walk because we were a little stressy, aggressy.
A little stressy, aggressive.
And we started talking. We flowed into it. And I was like, dang it. That should be a podcast episode because we were making such good, solid points. And so, yeah, now it's a podcast episode.
Which was basically, it was kind of a feed off of our last year episode, which was Imposter Syndrome.
So this is Imposter Syndrome part 2.
What is Imposter Syndrome, Tori?
Crappy and awful.
An incredibly
it's
efficient
so
definition.
awful.
So
did we read the definition last time?
I'm sure we did. I don't think I have it in front of me.
Should
but
I read it? I'll pull it up.
Yeah, you look up the Imposter Syndrome. But the idea is it is the belief that you are not as good at what you're doing as you actually are. So it's this belief that you're an imposter and everyone's going to find out that you're actually an imposter. And really, oftentimes that's not based in reality. Tori, do you have the definition?
I did, but then I realized it was a Wikipedia one. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm doing an official one.
I feel like a Wikipedia definition in this situation is fine.
Anyone can make it what they want. So hold on.
I feel like it would have been perfectly fine.
Okay,
I think you're overthinking
a
Wikipedia definition.
Okay, we'll do this one.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon or imposterism, is a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud.
Yes, it's the idea that you're a fraud at what you're
not
doing.
Good enough.
Which I think in the business world and in life that happens more often than we realize. Mm-hmm. And I think we kind of talked about our own dealings with imposter syndrome as doing what we do. Mm-hmm. And then also where they came from for me personally, realizing where those imposter syndromes come from. So how does imposter syndrome manifest for you?
I guess the sense of looking at mine kind of manifests itself from a comparison standpoint a lot. I think that's usually what triggers it for me. And then because I look at other people who are doing the things that I would like to be doing and I'm just dang, they're nailing it. Mm-hmm. They're killing it. And I'm over here is my stuff good enough?
Yeah.
And it's I get real nitpicky on my stuff, on the things that I do, whether it's shoots or, if I'm making things or whatever. Mainly it manifests in photography. But yeah, it's I'm always yeah, that's not as good as this person that did it over here.
Yeah.
And it looks like it comes really easy to them. So clearly I'm not doing it.
And
good
that's
enough.
it becomes a case of comparison at that point where it's oh, they look like they have it together because social media only shows the best. Oh, yes. I used the example, and I talked about this when we had our Sparks episode. We talked to TJ and Courtney.
Yeah.
And I brought this up, and it was the analogy of when we built our house. Mm-hmm. When we built our house, you don't see anyone else when they're building their house. You don't talk to those people generally. When you come out, they're building. So we were in a new development. So they built a whole house. They built our houses. They're building a bunch of houses at the same time. And we had a lot of problems with the builder. We had issues that popped up. There were things that just weren't getting done. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of delays. There were frustrations. And through that process, you're just seeing the other houses around you get built up. Yeah. And you're kind of going, well, how come mine's delayed? How come I'm having these issues? How come I'm having these problems? And I'm having to contact the builder and talk to them. Yeah. And because you don't see what's going on at the other houses and don't see those full stories, you assume that you're the only one dealing with construction problems. Yeah. But then what happened was once we finished our house and moved in and we met our neighbors and talked to them
and started having conversations,
we all had the same experience. It was all disasters. Yeah. They were yeah, you didn't get an AC unit either. Oh man, that's crazy. We were all dumb stuff like that. That didn't actually happen. But
the other next door neighbors were oh no, our bathroom wasn't done properly. So they had to come out 8 months later and rip it to shreds and redo it. And then it was a constant thing.
Yeah. And it becomes a whole thing of these are issues that we all have to face and deal with. And the reality of like imposter syndrome is that because we don't always see what everybody else is struggling with, it only fuels it more.
Yeah.
But I think deeper than that, there is like, because we shared about my issues with like imposter syndrome, because my imposter syndrome is different. It's more of like this constant.
What is imposter syndrome to you?
To me, it's this belief that I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't have it figured out. And it comes from looking at everybody else and looking like they have it figured out.
Yeah.
But it also comes from this fear. If I'm going to be honest, it becomes from this, like, it becomes a fear of failure.
Yeah.
And amounting to it. And it's, I think being honest, since losing my mom, it's only amplified itself more.
Yeah.
Because the reality is then I'm like, okay, well now I have even less time because it makes you aware of life.
Yeah.
But it also becomes more along the lines now of like, I'm trying to live up and honor her legacy. But if I'm a fraud, if I'm not good at all the things that I'm supposed to be, that she was proud of me, and then that makes me even somehow dishonor her or something.
Yeah.
Like it becomes this really complicated legacy of it. But for me, it's deep rooted because we talked about this. Like, it is the belief that you're going to fail because you don't know what you're doing, and that it almost feels like a universal vendetta because it feels like there's a lot of confirmations. Like we talked about even starting this podcast. Like we don't have a massive following. I've never built up 1 million followers on Instagram. I've never built up a huge community. Like I have a history of successes. Like we have a multi-6-figure business that is consistent every year over year, turning profits, being good for us. We've built a life. We own a house. We have a family. Like we're good. We've had successes in the other avenues I've done stuff with, from coaching to, you know, not just these video businesses, but from other avenues with building things. Like we've done a good job, and like, but the reality is it's the failures that seem to be
magnified.
They're magnified, but they almost feel like they're evidence of, okay, I'm actually a fraud at this.
Like eventually this is all going to crash because it's not.
Exactly.
I'm not good at this, actually. I'm just getting lucky.
And I use the examples of like, when we talked, I used the example of like, you know, I always wanted to have a massive following on Instagram. And at this moment, I don't. I have small, barely anything following. I never really built that up, never built up, you know, A More Perfect Union was a thing we were trying to launch that just didn't work the way I wanted it to at the time. And eventually burn out and just kind of fizzled for a while. And then, you know, I've had other podcasts that just, you know, they hit plateaus, or like there's always something that stops that growth.
Yeah.
And I think the comment I made was like, and it becomes one of those things where it's like that's self-fulfilling, or is it a case of what I think it is, which is a case of like, for me, imposter syndrome becomes this thing of like, okay, I'd rather half butt this. I'd rather not go full on this. I'd rather, you know, not fully try.
Because if I do fail.
Yeah, then I can always fall back on like, I didn't actually try.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what ended up happening. And I've traced it a lot back to like, I grew up heavy in golf.
Yeah.
You know, and this is kind of what we wanted to get into, was like, how did it manifest itself?
Yeah.
Because imposter syndrome comes from somewhere.
I don't know where mine comes from.
You know, who knows?
I mean, yeah, I don't know, but you have yours pinpointed.
Yeah. For me, I've pinpointed it as like, when I grew up, I was always really good at golf, and like people would compliment and talk about how good I was at it.
Yeah.
And this is when I was really young, like in my like 6, 7 years old, whatever it was. Constantly complimented, constantly talk about how good the swing was. Like it was always something that was brought up.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm good at this. But then when I actually entered competitive play, I faced other kids who were also good at it.
Yeah.
And I remember getting paired up in one tournament against like a guy whose dad was a pro golfer. So he'd like custom everything. And like my clubs were made by my dad because like we didn't have that kind of money.
Which then looking back at it though, that's a little more special than.
Yeah, no, it's special. It was just one of those things where it's like.
It's intimidating.
How do I compete against these guys? There's like so many of them. And it became a pressure of like not understanding how to deal with anxiety and how to deal with that on the course.
Not even knowing what it was.
Not even knowing what it was.
Yeah.
And it became easier in that situation because I didn't do well. It became easier in that situation to go, okay, if I try harder, there's a chance that I could still fail. And then I have tried and failed. And then that's a doom. Like, okay, that means you're just not good at it. Whereas if I don't try and I just kind of go halfway at it, and I failed, and I can always be like, well, I just never gave it my all. That's okay. I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people actually have that situation, because there's a lot of people, like when we've done this business we've done this for 11 years now. We've had so many 12 or 13.
Yeah.
We've had so many people start up photography businesses, videography businesses, start working with a spouse, start a business. And they tell us they're starting it and they were like, okay, cool. And then it fizzles out within the first year.
Yeah.
Or fizzles out within 2 years. Podcasts. We know people have started podcasts that fizzled out after the first season. And usually the reason that happens, from what I've gathered, and I think is a similar reason for why, like, you don't want to go full on into it, because what if it fails?
What if?
And that's a part of imposter syndrome. And I think that's the part we don't really acknowledge as being a part of imposter syndrome, is like, okay, well, what if it fails? What if this doesn't work out? Well, if you tried, then that means you are a fraud, kind of thing.
But then it's like, how do you get past that narrative that you tell yourself? Because it's like, failures aren't necessarily a bad thing because you learn from them.
Yeah.
Like, and you can't learn anything unless you experience it.
Yeah.
So it's like, figuring out how to change that, because like, if you fail at something, it doesn't mean that you're a piece of crap and that you don't know what you're doing and you can't do it. It just means that maybe you need to do it a different way, like approach it a different way, or maybe, you shift your gears or your mindset or like something, so it's like, I don't think that's the hard part, because no one likes the feeling of failure.
Yeah.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great.
No.
So, and that feeds imposter syndrome, because you can look at anything. And this makes me think of the conversation that we had with Jennings, where like, you can look at anything and morph it into a confirmation.
Oh yeah. Anything can become a sign for good or bad. Yeah.
So it's like figuring out how to filter that lens that you look through, because like, with him, he was like, well, I mean, there was plenty of times where he looked at and he was like, I could be done. Like, this isn't what I meant to do, because COVID hit and everyone was losing their jobs. And like, he lost a big job that he was looking forward to and all that. And it's like, he could have looked at that and been like, yeah, but instead he looked at it and said, well, this isn't necessarily my own thing. This is something that everyone else is struggling through too.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's difficult too, especially when like people who have natural personalities where they're just very hard on themselves and they have high expectation of themselves. Like,
Yeah. I wish there was a great answer for like, just do these things.
Yeah, there's not.
And there's not. The reality though is like, you're not going to have the answer for like, okay, do these steps and then bam, you're not going to have to deal with any of those issues. But the reality that I've kind of, because I dealt with it recently and like we talked through it, is like, you have to get physically active, get out of the house, get out of that headspace, do something, and not just like walk casually, like actually physically work, do something to like release endorphins and kind of get into a better mental headspace. Yeah. And then two, I always go back to something Lance would talk about this a lot, and he'd be like, no one knows. Everyone's trying to figure it out. No one has any idea what they're doing. And like, you have to realize that like a lot of the times, like even the people at the top have no idea what they're doing. Yeah. And I think we've built up this idea that when you become an expert, you're suddenly going to have like a switch flipped and you're going to be like, oh, I'm an expert now. I know exactly.
I am a genius.
I suddenly understand everything the way everyone like, and you don't feel any different. Yeah. Like your knowledge has increased, but you don't feel any different than you did.
No, you still feel incapable.
Yeah. Like I still feel like, even though physically my body is old and hurting and broken now, I still feel like the kid that was 13 years old or 10 years old trying to play golf. Like I still feel that way. Mm-hmm. I don't visually, outside of looking in a mirror, I don't visually have any reference for things really being different. Mm-hmm. We don't understand that like you can't physically see sometimes that you've gotten smarter and better at it and more equipment at it. Like, and also remembering that like your position, Wes said it when he was on the podcast, I think the last time we had him, which was like your position where you're at now is somewhere you wanted to be, you were praying to be. You were really wanting to be at this position right now. Mm-hmm. And now that you're here, you're going, no, I want to be at that position. Yeah. Which is great for a drive. But if imposter syndrome is constantly eating at it, then we have to refocus those goals.
And it's like practicing mindfulness of like sitting and being like, you know what, let me take a break from listing off all of the things that I wish I was doing, that I want to do like that, and what I don't have and where I'm not at. And then take a picture and like look at, okay, where was I a few years ago?
Yeah.
What have I succeeded in now?
Yeah.
Like, how am I blessed now? And like, what have I accomplished?
Yeah.
Holy crap. That's incredible. Go
Yeah.
me. Because if I could go back and talk to like 13-year-old Tori and be like, yeah, you've done this and this and this and this, 13-year-old me would have been like, no.
Yeah. And that's why that's why people talk about journaling so much. Like,
Yeah.
it is a proven way to like look back and be like, oh, wow, my life was that event
good.
that event was great, or that event was not as great as I thought it was.
Yeah.
Like, because our memories of events will like, we have a tendency, like I have a tendency to look back on like high school years as like some sort of golden age of like everything was amazing. And it's like,
crap.
how many times there were definitely nights where it was not crazy.
Yeah.
Like there were definitely times where I was far too close to run-ins with the law that I shouldn't have had. Like there were a lot of things that like I am forgetting when I try to remember those moments because my brain just blacks out those and it's like, no, it was all good.
No, it was sick.
It was all good,
dope.
fam.
It was dope.
And I say all that because like, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, there's this reality that you yourself have not grown at where you're at. Like if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, your brain is convincing, or your internal voice is saying to you, you're a fraud. You don't know what you're doing. And maybe you just started out. And if you just started out, then yeah, you don't know what you're doing.
But you're not a fraud.
You're not a fraud at that. But if you've been doing it for a few years, then you know more than you knew in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are actual frauds out there. There are actual people who are just like fake it till they make it all the way through.
I feel like those people are usually the people that don't have imposter syndrome.
Correct.
So that's how you know
Yeah.
the difference.
I think there also is a nature to us being more honest and just being more open about the fact of like when we talk, I said, yeah, I needed to be a little more vulnerable on this episode and be honest of like, you know, looking at the things that I've never accomplished seems to always outweigh the fact that like, despite having successful business and success in this freelance world, like even doing this, like when we started the business, I use this example.
Yeah.
We started the business. We started that first year we made, I think the first or second year we were over 120,000 was our revenue, which was great for our starting out. Awesome was doing that. And I was like, wow, no way we'll ever do it again. And like I met with a couple of business people who were like coaching us through, and they were like, yeah, okay, well, when you do your projections for next year, you, if the economy looks good, then you expect to make a little more and go from there. And I was like, no way. So I built our budgets around making even less because I just assumed that was a fluke.
Yeah. And
then the next year we made more, and then the next year we kept growing that way, but I kept assuming it would always go backwards.
Yeah.
And I say all that because like I kept assuming it would fail. And the reason I did that is that eventually I would take side jobs on top of this where like this was a full-time job. It was 100% full-time job, but I would go and like churches would come up and they'd be like, hey, we have this position. Would you like to do it? Oh yeah, I have to take that. That makes sense. Because this isn't working. This isn't going to work.
Mind you, in that mix, like, because I'm also taking part-time jobs too.
Yeah.
And then also both of us were in school at one point.
Yeah.
And then doing this full time and having weekends, we had no evenings, no days,
we were burning ourselves.
no time off.
Burning the candle from, I think what a therapist says, you're burning the candle from every direction.
Every direction.
Kind of just sticking it in fire. And it's like, that's the truth. Like that's what was happening though, is because this is what imposter syndrome can do, is like it can convince you that even though you're seeing the success right here, it's not real.
Yeah.
It won't last and it's not sustainable. So therefore you have to make backup plans. But making those backup plans can sometimes derail the original plan.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what was happening was I was going to these backup plans. I was jumping on these other options because, no, that made sense. Like those backup plans, that's going to be the better option.
Well, then you become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, then you become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Because you're so scared that you're not going to succeed and then it's going to be terrible and you're not going to be able to be successful and you're not going to make as much as you did before. And then you get all these side jobs and you get burnt out and you can't keep up and you can't do all these jobs. And then you don't do well.
You become that exact thing.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the key part to remember in imposter syndrome is like you have to physically talk to yourself and say, hey, this is the reality I know. This is the truth. It's not, life is not the way I'm talking about it. Like it's not this. I know as much as I know and I'm going to keep learning.
Yeah.
And also, if you really feel like you don't know anything, like this is the age of all ages for you to be a curious learner.
Yeah.
You know, like Luke is a great example because Luke, I'll never forget Luke telling me that like, I have a tendency to like just start talking and rambling and like go into a long, elaborate like lessons on history. And like, I had said something and he was like, hey man, you've said it like twice now and I don't know what you mean.
And I respect that.
And it took me off because like people generally don't ask what you mean. Like a lot.
They just kind of nod their head and they go, yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm guilty of that all the time, especially because like I'll zone out of a conversation and someone will say something. I'll be like, uh-huh. What?
That's different though. That's not you pretending you understand. That's like, you just being.
I respected it because I was like, oh yeah, and he was like, yeah, man, I just like, I'm not ever gonna be upset. I'm doing my Luke voice. Yeah, man. Like,
yeah, man.
Like I'm not gonna be upset about asking a question. Like if I don't know something, I'm just gonna ask it.
But like, I wish that everyone had that mindset because there's nothing wrong with not knowing. Yeah. And how can you learn if you don't ask?
Exactly. Like shout out to him again because like he's the only person I've ever met that actually called the Adobe helpline and was like, hey, I don't know how to use this thing. Help me. And like I'm pretty sure that guy on the other end was like, oh, wait, what?
We don't get this often.
Yeah, like this isn't like real. I didn't think you guys would do this. And it's like, that's awesome though. It's like, do you have the curiosity enough to like, okay, I want to get better at this. So how do I go get better at it?
Yeah.
Like, and this is like, for example, like when I switched to Resolve, it was a long learning process. But at some point I finally was just like, I don't want to not know this. I just want to learn it. Like, I've got to figure this out. Mm-hmm. So I just sat and did it and made the transition and like learned it and like had to go ask a lot of questions. And even now I still have to go like Google questions and like Google stuff. But like, we live in a time where you can do that. Mm-hmm. Like 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have that option. 20 years ago, you definitely didn't have that option. Like if you didn't know something, it was like, you're going to get on and hope that AOL had it. And if it didn't, then you were going to go, well, guess you got to go to the library and try to find somebody. And now you don't even have to. Like, how many times when I'm about to do something in my car, because I don't know anything about fully how a car works. I can definitely wire a car. I can do a lot of fun stuff with a car. But like 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I'm going to watch a YouTube video real quick and figure out before I go do something
or
stupid.
Shoot like a quick text to Joey.
Yeah. I'm going to be like, hey, so-and-so, like a friend of ours who knows cars. I'm going to be like, hey, before I do something stupid,
help me.
Is this stupid? And it's like, we have to, in order to help defeat imposter syndrome, we have to be willing to start asking questions and admitting that maybe we don't know everything. Because if you do sit in like unknowing, like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Yeah. It'll only serve as like proof to yourself that like, oh, you're a fraud. Yeah, but it's so easy to get out of that. I could just literally ask for help. Yeah. Like one of the best things we did for our business ever at any point was admitting, like getting rid of trying to do everything. Yes. Like when we first started, I was trying to do music recording, graphic design, photography, videography.
Taxes.
I was trying to do the taxes. I wasn't offering that as a service, to be clear.
No. But I mean, like, but like we admitted we couldn't do the taxes and we had,
Correct. But I'm talking about like services we offered.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Like we offered for music recording, we offered videography, photography, graphic design, and After Effects animation. We offered all of those things. Like those were all things I was willing to do. Yeah. And I learned quickly, like, that was just killing us and was only serving as like proof of like the overall imposter syndrome because I was trying to do too much. Mm-hmm. Like I can't realistically become an expert in all 5 of those things. Yeah. To any level. And it was always lacking in some avenues. Mm-hmm. So once we started peeling some of those off and just going, hey, we'll outsource those or I'll point you to someone who's far better at it than us. Yeah. And admitting that was a huge way for like us to become more legitimate in the other 3. Mm-hmm. Like we got way better in photography, way better in videography, way better in, those are the main 2. Once we got rid of those others, we got way better at that because we were able to focus and acknowledge that like, yeah, I am kind of a fraud in those areas. That's okay because I don't have to be expert in all that. I can be a jack of all trades still and a master of none, but I also don't have to be a jack of 900 trades. I can just be a jack of like 3 trades. Yeah. Or I can just, have a casual passion for those things and just do these things as services to offer. Yeah. And that was super helpful in it.
You don't get stretched too thin. Yeah. Too.
But I think also imposter syndrome because, this isn't just a business podcast anymore. So I think imposter syndrome can spread itself into your personal life. And I think you have to be aware of that as well of like imposter syndrome in your marriage, imposter syndrome as a husband or as a father, as a mother, like those all go, like, especially from like when you first have a kid.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of parents out there that do have a bit of imposter syndrome because like you look at social media, once again, strikes. You look at these social media, like I think the only time it ever like, it was more of a thing. I didn't have imposter syndrome, but it just made me angry because it's like when I had Caden, I had a lot of pain and damage. And so looking at all of these like social media posts of these moms that are like super done up, their hair is perfect, not a hair out of place, their makeup's perfect, they look like they just floated off of a cloud from heaven while they're holding their newborn child and looking lovingly into their husband's eyes and like all that stuff. And I'm like, you absolute liar.
Yeah, I like slept on the couch.
You
I didn't know.
Absolute liar.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting here, my hair's a rat's nest because I haven't gotten to take a shower, because I can't get out of bed, because I can't move.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're covered in like baby stuff
Juices.
and your own, I guess
Sweat.
but like your sweat and like you've been laying in the same bed for a few days and like you're both super exhausted. You don't have makeup on your face, your bags, you don't like, I looked at that and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so frustrating.
Very.
It's so frustrating because people do, and it's like, look, I'm happy for you. You look great, wonderful. But also it's like, what the freaking crap?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Like, why are you doing that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, it's not, I think and then like breastfeeding is a whole other thing because people expect it to be super simple, which for some people it is, which is another frustrating thing. But like it is a skill that you have to work at and you both learn at it because your child's never done it. You've never done it if it's your first child. So it's like that was a little difficult. But then like by the grace of God, I haven't been I haven't slipped into an imposter syndrome of like looking at other moms doing things and being certain ways. And I'm like, well, I'm not a good mom because da da da. And it's like, no, I know that I am the mom for my child.
Yeah.
I'm the right mom for my child.
Yeah.
And, we have a special relationship. It's just like you were the right father for our child. Like, like we know how to love him well and we have that. And that is our child. And, it's like, that I have confidence in. I have confidence that I'm a good mom.
Yeah.
And so, which I'm very excited. That makes me happy to say that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm not second guessing myself. I'm not like, oh my God, well, these people are doing that. And, like, no, I love my kid. I take care of my kid. I enjoy time with my kid. I'm a good mom.
You are.
So it's like, but a lot of people do struggle with that.
Yeah.
So then that comes back into like having conversations with yourself, having conversations with other people that you trust about it and getting those thoughts out because we've talked about that many a time.
This is one of those times where it's like okay to talk to yourself.
Yes, it is okay to talk to yourself and have conversations.
Yeah, because then you're able to like go through and talk about imposter syndrome and kind of work through it. If you guys have not listened to our first one, it's definitely a good one to go back to because it kind of breaks up the different types of imposter syndrome, like the various versions of it, because there are different like versions that will manifest themselves that are like, sometimes you're the type of person who's like, if you start something, you're like, I'm not good at this, you're going to immediately quit.
Yeah.
And I think like you might not know where it came from. Like not everybody can pinpoint it like I was able to, but like there is a relevance to that of like, you have convinced yourself to like maybe not try the things. Like maybe you're stuck in a job you don't love or a career path you're not going or like something you're not doing. And you're stuck there because of the fact that you're convinced that like, I don't know where to move. You're paralyzed. Like, should I move to this direction or this direction? Well, I don't know because I feel like a fraud either way.
I mean, fear is a wonderful manipulation tool.
Yeah.
Like
there's a reason so many businesses and governments use it.
It's just, once you introduce fear into the equation, like that, it will break you. It will break you because you're so scared. And it does. It paralyzes you. Side note, thank you for saying I'm a good mom. I never said thank you in that. So thank you. But I just want to make sure I said thank you. I felt bad because I didn't say thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, fear definitely will paralyze you. I think a lot of my personal imposter syndrome shows up more in work stuff and like this, because I do remember having like a conversation like when we were walking and I was like, who the crap cares what we have to say?
Yeah.
Like, why do we feel that we can sit down and record ourselves having a conversation and think that people care? you know, because it's like, but then I'm like, well, I enjoy having a conversation and I enjoy watching these kinds of people, like this kind of thing. Yeah. So it's like, maybe there is a couple people out there that enjoy it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, that's where it starts creeping in, because it's like, who am I to think that someone gives a crap about what I have to say?
Yeah. And I think that's a mindset of like, okay, who cares? Who knows? Who cares what I have to say? But also at the same time, you got to think of it as like, there might be one or two people.
Yeah.
And even if it's one or two people, is it worth it?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, if we're enjoying it, then it's worth it.
For me, it's fun. Like, I enjoy doing this. And that's the thing that I have to circle back around and say like, well, but this is something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I enjoy sitting down with you and getting to have conversations like this. And like, it is a way to go back and like look at past conversations and like, you know, kind of hear what other people have to say, what we had to say, you know, so it's like, that is worth it.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. And so it's like, whenever those thoughts start creeping in, like, that's my personal thing of like having to go back and be like, yeah, but I'm doing this because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And if somebody else gains something from it along the way, then fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think that's where my imposter syndrome manifests in podcasting and in photography. The two P's.
The two P's.
P squared.
Not in video.
PP. Not in video because I don't know a lot and I'm okay with that because that's why I ask questions.
But that's exactly how we need to be with everything.
Yes.
That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
It's like
I'm content in not knowing how to do that. Well, I mean, I know something. I am capable.
Yeah.
But there's and I've grown over time, but there are some things that I'm like, I forgot. Can you help me? Because I don't know, you know? And it's like, I'm content for whatever reason with that. I'm content. But when it's like other things, I guess maybe because video is not very personal to me.
Yeah.
But it's more so in the things that are like personal.
Yeah. Because you're not going to be an imposter. You're not going to feel like an imposter on something you actually don't know.
Yeah.
So things you know is like, then you're going to feel like an imposter because then you're pretending to be something.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know it, then you're not pretending to be it.
Yep.
Which is ironic and crazy.
Yes.
I guess when you think about it. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of like imposter syndrome truly is like the poison to any business or relationship or anything because it convinces you that you have to quit. And if you keep letting it go, because like the only way to grow anything, the only way to do anything, like from marriage to business to life to relationships, everything is built on consistency. Mm-hmm. Like your ability to show up and keep doing it. And what imposter syndrome attacks is that will and drive to keep showing up and do it and do again and again and again.
Yep.
So that's the key. Like if it keeps hitting that, like then you're just not going to want to keep doing it and you're going to never be able to build anything because you it's eating away at that.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to, as soon as it starts, jump on it and go, no, okay, that's not the truth. The truth is blank, blank, blank. Like I know this is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, that's a key part of it. But I thought this was a good discussion on imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
If you guys didn't listen to the first one, definitely check out the first episode on imposter syndrome.
It's good.
It is well worth a listen. I mean, we're a little biased, obviously, but
it's a good topic.
Guys, thanks for joining us for this episode of 626. Remember to check us out on 626.com, the website, and our Instagram as well.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast. If you enjoy the 626 podcast, the best thing you can do for us is to share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review. It helps us a lot to get discovered.
And be sure to check us out on Instagram at 626podcast.